everyone, and welcome to Read This Now, the weekly webcast where Brad Gustafson and I share two books that we love and we think you should read. When, Brad?
This is my signature right now, Jen, right now.
I love it. I love it. How are you, my friend?
Doing so well. I've been on a reading binge. I had some vacation days, which usually translates to extra reading. So it was a tough decision here this week, Jen, on what to share. I got to tell you.
Okay. I can't wait. Lay it on us.
Okay. So I was putzing around with, I think you and I have talked about, maybe even co-presented on the 6-word book talk before. So really, like, how do you pick 6 words to tell about a book, and how it might come across as superficial, but really forcing yourself to dig deep to capture the plot and the emotions is a higher order thinking thing. Now I'm going to fall drastically short of that, but it can be, right? For some people like you would be able to pull it up. But anyway, I have a 6-word book talk that I'll share for the book. I didn't write it down, so this is kind of a dangerous thing. So you'll see me counting on my, you're gonna be like, oh Brad, so green. So here's my 6-word book talk. I got to do this for effect too. I'm going to share the book here. Okay. Titans. Yes. And if you look closely at the horses, you'll see that they are slightly different than biological horses. They are robots. So here we go. High tech horse racing versus humanity.
Wow.
So that's the book talk, and all the depth of my, like, it might just sound like a what's the word, summary. It's not, because it's a lot, the book is a lot deeper than that, because it's not just like mechanical horse racing versus humanity. It's like this collision of it. And I won't give away the ending because it's so ridiculously good and unexpected and all that. But in some cases, the mechanical horses bring out humanity, the best and worst of it in different people and characters. So that's why I said versus. Just so well done. I'll also say this is like, I don't know what percentage of books my eyeballs sweat on, if you know what I'm saying, like cry on. It's not a super high percentage, but there were this one did it to me. Like, I'm so sorry
to interrupt you, but that was the best thing maybe you've ever said in this entire program. Calling tears eyeball sweat. That is amazing.
Excellent. But there's a certain chapter in here where it happened twice, and I'm like, good grief. But a quicker flyby, just in case people are on the fence about this, which you shouldn't be. You should read it now. One of the defining aspects of the book, in addition to the horse races and kind of survival story, and how Astrid is the strong young woman who's the main character, who ends up riding a Titan, which has always been a dream of hers, but it's her relationship with her dad, where he just does not give her the love or affirmation, or everything he says is negative or neutral, and she's just wishing for anything, come on, Dad, like anything positive. So there's that battle. There's all these like minor, it's not just about the overarching Titan race circuit or series. There are all these relationships, and that's one of the heavier ones. But the people who come along, Astrid, her best friend Magnolia, and some other adults in her life, oh my gosh, it's a cast of characters that really, you really should read this right now. It's Titans by Victoria Scott.
That cover is so gorgeous. I mean, you just were holding that up, and my breath was taken away. That is really gorgeous.
Yeah, I agree. I was looking online. There's another version that I don't know if it's older or newer, that's of a single horse, kind of close up, the frontal view of a horse. That's pretty cool too. But this one, I just love the cover, colors, and there's a cool thing. It's kind of a subtle nuance. You know how often you'll notice after you read a book, you'll notice more on the cover. But the Titans at the race gates, the jockeys turn their horse on in the race mode, and their eyeballs turn red. So this clearly is happening during a race, because the horse's eyeballs are all red. So
wow, that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
It kind of reminds me of, now I haven't read that book, so just from your book talk, it reminds me, there was a book that came out, gosh, probably 6 or 8 years ago now, called The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. And that is one of my favorite books of all time. And it is about these horses who are not robotic, but have like sort of supernatural elements, like sort of powers, you know, and it's very similar to what you're describing in that though the connection between the horse and the human, it brings or reveals the reality of that human in a way that is amplified. So the kinder, the more gentle the human, the more the horse, I think, brings that out in them, and vice versa. So it like just reveals who they are, you know. And then there's conflict around these horse races, the Scorpio races or whatever. So even though that is sci-fi, and I think Scorpio race is a little more fantasy, I could see some parallels in what you were saying, and I love Scorpio races, so that makes me really want to grab that book.
Yeah, I think you'll definitely see some parallels. I also like the complexity. I alluded to this earlier, complexity of the characters, because Astrid also, she's a mathematical whiz. She really excels, and how that translates on the track. These races aren't just, it's not just speed. There are traps and challenges and such. So she's able, as she's racing, to compensate for her inexperience on the circuit by figuring out some of the traps and always looking for patterns and sequences and stuff. And that's kind of a neat aspect too. So.
Wow. Well, that sounds great. I'm excited to pick that one up myself. And you know how I am always looking for connections between the book you read and the book I read? I think this week, the connection is going to be around eyeball sweat. I think that's going to be it. Because I found myself, this is a book that I've actually read a few times now, and I'm not a rereader, but I keep going back to it, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. But there are definite, especially the first time I read it, moments where I found myself huddling up and had to put it down because there are parts that are hard to read. I'm going to go ahead and show you the cover because I think it's gorgeous. It's called Wake: The Hidden History of Women-Led Slave Revolts. And while that title like makes it sound a little bit like, a straightforward nonfiction book researching a certain period of history, and there is that to it, it's really this interesting hybrid. First of all, it's a graphic novel. It's done in illustrations the whole way through, and I'm going to show you a couple of those in a minute. But it's really the story of Rebecca Hall, who's the author, who decided she wanted to research slave revolts that were led by women, because that particular part of history is often untold, that there is history around slave revolts, but oftentimes it talks about them being led by men. And as a Black woman, she knew her own grandmother was an enslaved person who was fierce and fought her entire life for to be able to be treated in the way that she deserved and to fight for a better life for her children and grandchildren, etc. And Rebecca knew that there are just fierce Black women, that there's no way that women weren't involved in these slave revolts, right? So she started to do this research, and what she found was not only were women erased in a lot of the history that does exist about slave revolts, but that there are keepers of history who wanted to prevent her from finding them. For example, I didn't know this, Brad, and it seems so obvious. I'm almost ashamed that I didn't know it. Like, I was today years old when I learned this thing, right? That enslaved people were treated as property, and as such, they were insured. I did not know this, right? So like slave ships that would be carrying enslaved people from one country to, say, the Americas or to Great Britain or wherever, that property was insured. And so if something happened to that person, they either were killed or died as a result of the terrible journey, then ledgers were kept that detailed what happened to them because as property, they were insured. Now, even just saying that, it's kind of sickening to even recognize that was the case. But what that also means is that the insurance companies kept all of these records of this property, right? Some of these insurance companies still exist today. They're like some of the insurance companies that we would know the names of, that because they've existed for hundreds of years. And so in her research, Rebecca went to some of these insurance companies to get their records so she could find out, hey, if this enslaved woman, it shows that she was killed during a slave revolt, then that's history. Like that's the history of this woman being involved, right? So anyway, what she found was that many of these insurance companies wouldn't let her see the records, that they were, didn't want their name associated with that time in history and their role in the slave trade, And so I'm reading this, and especially in the context of today, it's like, I just kept thinking about how sometimes we want to forget about certain aspects of our history because it makes us uncomfortable. There's like a certain amount of discomfort, right? But discomfort is also a sign of growth. Like it's a reason why we call them growing pains, right? Growing and learning sometimes hurts in a way. It's painful, but we come out the other end better. And people like Rebecca Hall persevere to uncover this truth. But what is really fascinating about this book is because this history has been erased and also hidden, and historians are being prevented from being able to research it in some cases, then that means she had to imagine what the lives were of these women were like. And so it's one part, her like sort of memoir of trying to uncover the facts of these women, and then one part, these imaginings, these like made up parts of the book where she imagines what their life would have been like. And I hesitate to even use the word made up because they're fictionalized, but because she's a historian who knows a heck of a lot about this time period, they're really grounded in historical fact, even though they might not apply to this specific person, right? So it's this hybrid of nonfiction and fiction, right? You've got the nonfiction, here's the history and the story of this woman trying to find it. And then the fiction, here's the story of this potential enslaved woman who led a riot against her captors, right? And so you go kind of back and forth, which makes the book, number one, a page turner, like in a way that you wouldn't think of a history book being, but then also really adds a level of humanity to the stories of these women who literally are named in history, things like slave woman number 4, slave woman number 11. We don't even have a record of their names. And so she gives them a name and gives them a life and gives them a voice in a way that I found to be really powerful. But the other thing I wanted to show you, Brad, because I knew you in particular would appreciate this, the illustrations in this book are freaking remarkable. I mean, they are incredible because they so often capture, even in one drawing, this woman trying to do her research with the weight of history on her. And I'm going to give you an example, right? So this is a scene where she is researching these 2 women who she doesn't have names for, and that she's trying to like figure out a little bit about her life. And she stands up and in her office, and you can kind of see, there she is, right? And out her window, that's the slave ship that they were on, the Unity, which we know from the reading. But I want you to look at her shadow. So as we scroll up, it's the shadow, her shadow forms into the 2 women. And we see things like this throughout the book. Here's how the book opens. You can see her, she's walking into New York, and this is all done in black and white. Let me get to this page. Hang on, I'm getting there. Okay, so she's walking into the streets of New York, right? But then there's water on the street, and in the puddles reflection, you can see the city from what it may have looked like when slaves were building it. You see what I'm saying? So this entire book, it's like this, here we are in modern day history. I mean, here we are in modern day, And then when we look at our reflection through history, it shows a different version of ourselves. And it's just so cool. And I've never read anything exactly like it. I have seen more and more books recently where there's sort of this hybrid between fiction and nonfiction, where there's a nonfiction primary source sort of piece, and then some aspects of it are fictionalized for effect. I've seen a few books like that, but Wake to me is one of the most incredible books I've read all year, and I just think you should read it now. It's called Wake by, excuse me, The Hidden History of Women-Led Slave Movements. And I want to just say that it's Rebecca Hall and it's Hugo Martínez, who is the illustrator. So I'm sorry, go on.
So I don't have nearly as deep a repertoire as authors and titles to compare or draw to. So forgive me for this, but I'll just ask, is it a little bit reminiscent of what Alan Gratz does with regard to studying real events and then bringing them to life? Or
yes, in so much as the fictionalized parts of this are absolutely reminiscent of what Alan Gratz does, where you've got historical, and those aspects are historical fiction in so much as they are based on real people, based on real events, and there's lots of historical detail that's sprinkled throughout. But the way this book differs is you have those small components, and then next to them is straight up nonfiction, straight up memoir of this is what happened, like it's almost like the primary source next to the fictionalized piece, so you get to read them alternating ways. So here's the history, here's the fiction story, here's the history, here's the fiction story. It's really
cool. Yeah, you know how writers are so wildly creative. It looked like the illustrations and art were just not just artistic masterpieces, but also, I don't know how else to say it, like just incredibly creative and meaningful on multiple levels.
Yes. So to be perfectly frank, when I first picked up the book and just flipped through it, I was disappointed to see that all the drawings were just in black and white. Only because for me, my eye, busy just black and white drawings are sometimes a little hard for me to find a place for my eye to rest. Like it's just a little bit, it's a heavier lift for me to read a graphic novel that's just done in like sort of a busy black and white style. However, so that's my initial reaction, right? And this is an example of where my initial reaction was wrong, because as I started to dig in, I just started to see the real power of how those drawings are so intricate. You talked about how in the cover of the book you read this week, like after reading it, you noticed the red eyes on the cover, right? I felt that way about this book. Is after reading pages, I would flip back to an initial drawing and go, oh, like I can see now where some of the things are included in there. There's little Easter eggs in so many of the drawings. They're very intricate and layered. The layers of meaning in those drawings is remarkable. It's so impressive, Brad. I can't overstate it.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, it sounds like we both had two great books this week, even though they're really different. They did make our eyes sweat, so that is something in common, right?
Absolutely.
Where can our friends, our 3.5 viewers, go if they want to read more, like get our age recommendations for these books, or check out the rest of the books that we've read over the years?
Yeah, I have the website here in a second. I'll share. I'm not ready to talk about it yet, but I was reading a book you book talked a few weeks ago. Like, I had a stack and I was debating, what do I grab? And I just grabbed it based on your book talk. And I'm only halfway through, and so good, Jen. So good. So that was my teaser for going to the archives, the website, bit.ly/read_. Oh my gosh, am I getting this? It's kind of the summer brain I got going on.
It's been a couple. We took last week off too, so
we did. BIT. I am totally blanking here, Jen.
bit.ly/read_this_now. Woo! Woo! Hey, woo! You did it.
I broke into a sweat there. Holy cow.
As long as it didn't include your eyeballs, you're good. All right, everyone. Have a great weekend. Happy reading.